This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto, Knuckles OX, and Baba Snake. We resume as the one-year conquest effort of Dr. Eggman and Metal Knuckles officially launches, while Little Planet continues its orbit away from Earth, thus its stranding of our heroes across the time stream. Chronologically first, we check back in with the defeated Sonic in a secluded jungle of the ancient past, seeing him brought right back to a state of being alone and on his own terms that he hasn't known for a while now, and thus feels foreign to. Besides this, even if he was in a mood to try looking on the bright side and go exploring the past, all he can think about is his brothers and Amy, and his trouncing at the hands of Metal Sonic, in both power, speed, and how figuratively high the bot was willing to fly in order to shatter his organic counterpart's limits. Quite literally, in fact, as the hurt hog is well aware that if the Metal Man is currently speeding around the sky finds him again as he is and on his own, he'd be a crispy critter. And so he lies low and laments his failure, for once being the first to note Knuckles was right, and if he'd only held on to Tails a bit tighter, or paid closer attention to the group's safety from the get-go, things would have went far differently. This regret ultimately making it much harder to rally and make a comeback to begin seeking a solution than usual. Meanwhile, in the future, Tails has thankfully been able to recover just enough to crawl away to safety to lick his wounds, and ultimately cry the horrible situation he's been put in, while his Metal counterpart, instead of accepting any half measures in its directive to eliminate him, commands the badnik hordes under his control to hunt him down and ensure he's finished off, or more optimally, captured for dissection and use as a further energy source. And hearing Metal Tail's robotic voice cast these orders across the zones of this world drives our young fox hero into a state of even more intense fear, as Tails knows that the very idea of being a leader, frontman, and the center of attention is already too much for him, only highlighting the aspects he lacks over his brothers and causing him to miss them all the more, creating a self-defeating spiral in him as well, as he's already lost all faith in going against his Metal doppelganger. Finally, in the present day on Little Planet, Amy cries until she can't anymore, trying to desperately shake Knuckles awake, as in her panic, she has no idea what she needs to do, but when her tears are spent, she calms and resolves herself, and does what she can in order to mend Knuckles' wounds for now, allowing him to wake up naturally after letting his body heal the best it can while he rests, so that when he does wake up, it's in a great quantifiable deal less pain than he would have otherwise, even if he can only barely stand or move. Given time for the ringing in his ears to settle, and realizing the gravity of their situation, Knuckles has his own emotional moment over his loss and separation with his brothers, though showing the growth being the quote-unquote mature one is imposed on him. He apologizes to Amy and thanks her for her help, while stifling his rage, and instead deciding to put it into something productive, like a plan to fix this mess for starters. Amy is excited to hear this despite still seeming distraught, though this is replaced by utter shock when Knuckles bluntly replies that he's going to train her up into a warrior, as he did with Sonic and Tails, since with both his brothers in the world being in dire peril at the hands of Eggman for a whole year, they won't have even a picosecond to lose when they get their chance, and that's going to mean splitting up to rescue both simultaneously, so they can all stand against Eggman together. Rosie the Rascal is overwhelmed by a lot being thrown at her so quickly, like what Knuckles expects her to do, how he plans to get her to that level so quickly, how they'll get strong enough to beat Team Robotnik, how they'll find the specific times they need to go to, what a picosecond is, and why in general he wants to depend on her, since as capable as Team Guardian is, and averse to her the boys seem, she's felt more like a burden. In response, Knuckles, a bit shortly like Sonic would, remarks that he wants her to help them fight, plans to train her intensely and in depth on how to do so for the duration of the year, admits that he still needs more time to think on their strategy and tracking exactly, and that Tails taught him it's a big word that means a super short amount of time. Finally, as for why her, partially because from what he's learned of her on this trip so far, she's a nosy bleeding heart, who's seemingly always gonna put herself in danger, just like another hedgehog he knows, and that blue punk taught him that someone that well-meaning can't be all bad, noting that despite him blatantly rejecting her romantic invitations, she was still more worried about him than herself when she got kidnapped, so if that's to be the case, then she needs to know how to protect herself anyway. More importantly, showing that he truly recognizes Amy, and is taking an honest look at her as an individual potential, as he did once before, so Knuckles is asking the pink hedgehog to please help him save his little brothers in their world. Now seeing what Sonic and Tails see in the Red Ruffian as an older brother figure, Amy rolls up all her courage and her big heart, and agrees, so as part of this call to action, becomes assertively insistent that Knuckles take it easy while he heals up, to which he agrees that she'll allow him to begin coaching her rather immediately while they do so, since they have to get her a firm grasp and capability for the basics, before they can worry about striving for something beyond that. At this same instant, scattered across time, Sonic and Tails are challenged with similar darkness before the dawn moments. In the past, as Metal Sonic passes overhead once again, and what Sonic has come to realize are victory laps, rather than efforts to confirm his death, the blue buffoon has his own little rage out moment, as childishly, he decides that the fight may be over, but their race ain't, so he takes off trying to trace the same loops as Metal overhead, but with fresh injuries and exhaustion waning on him. and the constant hard-to-maneuver impediments of the ancient Untamed past, he simply can't run as full out as he wishes, making Sonic all the more frustrated, until suddenly he notices a blue glow beginning to surround him, a bit of hope welling up that maybe the Time Gem's power has extended in order to allow him to travel again. However, this is evidently not that, as he suddenly realizes the glow is manifesting from him. Then as all that disappointment and loneliness hits him all over again, a burst of speed like he's never known before overtakes his stubby body, the energy he'd unknowingly gathered exploding outward, as he's sent face first into a huge tree, at such speeds that at first, he fears he'll splat himself into goo against it, but instead, he punches a hole clean through it thanks to the boost, causing it to fall and shake the ancient forest, then arriving on the other side and spinning off the splinters caught in his fur, as thanks to not being able to maintain whatever this is for long, he clumsily skids to a halt on the other side, and painfully stops by hitting another tree, and thus left in a shock of utter bewilderment of what he's just done. Was that the chaos energy stuff Tails was talking about? Must have been, because he's suddenly more tired than ever before. But then, he hears the sound of a turbine, and knows Metal Sonic must have noticed too, so he returns to limping off in the opposite direction, though this time, with a smug smirk, as once again motivated by just thinking about his brothers. The blue hedgehog realizes he has to master using his chaos energy as soon as possible if he wants to beat this version of Metal Sonic, resolving to patch himself up and then go into a hardcore Knuckles-style training regiment. Whilst thinking like Tails, he can even get crafty and try to increase his effectiveness with homemade leg weights and resistant parachutes fashioned from ancient temple stones in the jungle around him. Even when he's attempting to rest and relax, he tries to calm his mind and think of all the info he knows about the nature of his enemy, as well as strategies and tactics to beat his metal counterpart, inadvertently teaching himself the art of meditation in the process. In the bad future of Wacky Workbench, Tails gets chased into one of the seemingly only abandoned factories in the industrialized hellscape by the badniks pursuing him. However, he stops feeling like it's sanctuary when he realizes it's a factory completely focused on making merchandise, products, and toys based around Team Guardian, as if the Eggman of this timeline held them up as potential saviors, only to crush people's hopes when their robotic replicas let the badniks to turn their homes into smokestacks. He traverses through the terrifying factory, finding dusty memorabilia and horrifying decaying dolls of his brothers, Sonic action figures with miscolored eyes and demonic grins, misshapen Knuckles toys that endlessly make mind-numbing noises, until he finally breaks into the back room of the factory, and then even further, into a small secluded area that's been blocked off so that only the smallest of gaps remain, labeled R&D, in which he is determined to hide forever. However, here in the darkness, though he least expects it, Tails nearly has the scare of his life, as he at first assumes that conniving Metal Tails has somehow already found and snuck up on him. But instead, he finds the only friendly face around for him in this timeline, a plush version of his own, floating in front of him limply, as if a marionette, while on top of its head, a bright red light shines on what appears to be an antenna. This makes Tails panic, assuming this thing will give away his hiding spot, but having learned from Knuckles to start favoring fight over flight when he has no other choice, the Flesh and Blood Fox's response to this non-metallic copy is to whack it in the nose to get it away from him, causing the artificial life form to cry out in obvious pain, as it asks what on earth that was for in a voice that kinda sounds like an older robotic version of his own. Suddenly feeling remorseful, Tails remembers his manners and apologizes, blabbering on about the ordeal he's been through, and the misunderstanding, then introducing himself and asking who and what this is. But not a fan of the speed talking, the animated plush tells him to slow down and cannon as it flows back no worse for wear, despite its cries, introducing itself rather proudly as the one and only abandoned replica toy prototype based on the one member of the foolish rebellion against Dr. Robotnik that was smart enough to tuck his tails, lie down, and die for the sake of the Empire. Miles Prower, designated the Tails doll, and for that reason, it is equipped with an advanced AI, not dissimilar to that of Metal Tails, and to make him more fun to belittle and abuse. That or it's haunted/possessed, one or the other, and the deranged doll is just forgotten. Weirded out by this, Tails sweat drops that he can see why the plush wasn't able to get past the prototype stage, but in response, the doll asks if the fox would rather spend his time with the inferior models that made it out of market, to which Tails vehemently refuses, before returning to his sulking, with all the more reason to now that he's learned this timeline apparently remembers him as a coward. Seemingly slow on the uptake for an advanced AI, Tails' doll only now realizes exactly who his company is, but only becomes so much more welcoming, simply asking Tails not to leave his biological waste around his already gross and disordered home, to which Tails insists that he won't, as with the odds and power he's up against, he's just as likely to end up as a waste himself, and be out of the doll's hair soon enough. Scoffing flippantly, the plush says it is the smart move not to go up against the Empire, but still, Tails' dolls criticize that this is what he doesn't get about the creature he's meant to emulate, as though his creators may have ultimately looked down on his intellect. Even he is smart enough to know that power in that yellow upstart model isn't all its own, it's mostly Mr. Prower's. This perks Tails' ears enough that he asks the doll to elaborate, to which he reluctantly informs that Dr. Robotnik had an extreme energy cost in order to make 3 robot duplicates with the specification to beat Team Guardian. So instead of going with small critters, he went a bit more directly, collecting samples from each of them, charged with their chaos energy, which his copycat bots could harness to use their powers against them. Utterly shocked by this revelation, this makes a billion thoughts run through through Tails' mind, but chiefly among them is the fact that if Eggman was able to squeeze so much juice out of only a couple of quills and fur he and his brothers wouldn't have missed, then the amounts they must be able to tap from the source should be insane. A sentiment Tails' doll responds to with duh, why else would Metal Tails want to skin him alive so badly, simultaneously making Tails feel dumb, and paradoxically giving him some confidence back, as looking down at the tight fits he's made hearing what he's so afraid of is his own power. For but a moment, it crackles with a subtle charge of static, and that helps him to get his mind going in the right direction to begin formulating a plan of counterattack. One Tails' doll in interest of escaping the sheer boredom this life wants in on. In the present, Amy begins her training and Knuckles gets fully on the mend, though he's a bit disobedient to her treatment at first, frequently trying to get up to train or play the fight with Metal Knuckles in his head, so that next time when they duke it out, he'll be ready in mind and body. Similarly, Amy at first often tries to lighten the intensity of their training or encourage they do something more pleasant instead, but coming to understand one another, they eventually find balance, and by the time a month passes, Knuckles is back on his feet at 100%, and Amy is starting to shape up at the very basics. Now capable of thinking deeper on his plan for tracking the timelines of the boys, Knuckles racks his brain for a good bit, thinking of everything from good old natural echidna treasure hunting skills to praying to the Master Emerald to show him the way. But as those aren't options here, in the end, it's just this thought of the magic gems that gives Knuckles a Hail Mary plan. Thinking back to Amy's claims of having divined her meeting with Team Guardian, and pondering if this ability could be an art form based in, or possibly bolstered by chaos energy, if some amount of it really is possessed by all living things, seeing them too set out to try and attain mastery over their hidden power. But thanks to multiple factors like trying to keep up with a prodigy like Sonic, his calmer, more matured nature making it much easier to attune to the Master Emerald, and thus energies like it, and the sheer desperation of their situation, Knuckles too begins to feel the slight tingle of this untapped potential, giving him something to work towards and slowly chisel out of himself, while also figuring out a process that would help him teach Amy to do the same, just as he did with Sonic and Tails before her. To this end, as a year of long bitter work passes and Little Planet begins its approach back towards the Earth, they are in the end more than successful in achieving S-rank results, not only feeling stronger and more confident than ever, but also boasting brand new abilities, which will prove vital in the adventures ahead. In the case of Amy, the results are overwhelmingly impressive, as under Knuckles' tutelage, she's obtained speed somewhat comparable to Sonic's, as well as cunning and toughness that Tails and he will be proud of. And more importantly, he's been able to refine what the Rose calls her immense strength of the maiden into the focused combat of a warrior. To such an extent, he's honestly a bit embarrassed by the fact she's taken to this whole chaos energy dealio way better than him, mostly on account of how open-minded and romantic to the concept of life energy and forces beyond an individual's control that tie and bind their lives together she is. By the time their training is over, manifesting two chaos abilities to his one. Firstly, there is her Chaos Mend, something only describable as a weak healing magic, which allows her to cure small wounds, very helpful considering all their training. But more impressively, the ability that's going to save the day is her now mastered Chaos Divination, as channeling her energy in the form of tarot cards allows the Pink Hedgehog to access a kind of foresight or hyper-awareness, allowing her to try and divine the location of Sonic and Tails' energies across the timeline, the moments leading up to doing so remaining just as tense as the entire year so far, as Knuckles' worry for his brothers has only grown by the day. As for his results, while he was certainly able to get tougher, the ability he manifested isn't as good for fighting as he'd hoped, but it's sure to help him scrap that stupid metal copy and protect his little brothers better than he ever could before, and that's all that matters. As Knuckles resolves this, Amy reports to her teacher that she now knows when and where they need to go, and so with no time to waste, they get prepared to move out. Now knowing how to manipulate the time stones well enough, the two split up down opposite sides of the speedway, with Knuckles going to the future for Tails, who he's admittedly a bit more worried about how he's holding up, since he is after all the baby of the family, while Amy is heading for Sonic's location. But on his way to take off in the direction of the future with a certain amount of speed, Metal Knuckles reappears on Little Planet and chases him with Eggman speaking through him, informing how his conquest of the planet is going well. So now, phase 2 of his plans to chain Little Planet down permanently to use it for his empire, meaning Metal Knuckles isn't here for a friendly spar this time, and agreeing he didn't want one either, Knuckles squares up to deal with this first, as the rematch begins literally inside the time wormhole. Thanks to the time dilation inside, it's not clear whether this will take an instant or an eternity. Regardless, the battle is fiercer than last time, but without Amy in the crossfire as a hostage, and with a year's strength and chaos training under his belt, Knuckles contends much better now, able to cleanly overwhelm and force the robot Faker to abandon brawling like him in order to prove his superiority, and instead rely on his mechanical advantages once again. In this moment, Knuckles decides it's finally time to show off his new Chaos Shield, and use it to charge into Metal Knuckles' guard while he tries to blast him. Then, it seemingly falters when the robot drill punches through it, and cleanly into Knuckles' face. However, the Echidna tanks this better than the robot, as by gritting his teeth and bulldozing his head into the blow to rob it of power, Knuckles causes his metal clone's fist to crumple, an issue he states his flesh and blood ain't gonna face, since for the sake of his family, he's found a way to make it unbreakable. Then, resummoning and condensing his shield around his fist to make it even more so, Knuckles puts it cleanly through his metal counterpart's torso, causing the metal ruffian to short out, as finally getting an outlet for his anger, Knuckles goes on to make good of his threats to turn Metal Knuckles into scrap, as he thrashes and beats it literally into the ground of Stardust Speedway, until he's certain the bot's get up and go is all gone. Then with the final stomp to the head as he was given, the Guardian takes off to fulfill his duty. Meanwhile, in the past and future, Sonic and Tails seek to begin their own rematches and defeat their metal counterparts before they can return to the present. So having trained in order to obtain a much earlier mastery of an ability he wouldn't grasp until much later in his life normally, Sonic can now use his Chaos Boost, or just Boost for short as he prefers, to fully outspeed Metal Sonic. A fact he introduces to the blue bot the hardest way he can think of, by homing in on him in the skies from the ground and spin dashing up to him by pulling a trick off a loop, allowing him to land a critical surprise attack on Metal, leaving it literally shocked, as Sonic has somehow surpassed and blown right through the ring spark field. And unfortunately for Metal Sonic, as the character who unequivocally benefits the most from training under Knuckles and learning through Tails the concepts of Chaos Energy early, Sonic can apply these new skills to all he's already achieved, making the stolen power the bot harnesses from his quill rather paltry in comparison. So that in the end, it's it left in a beaten mess on the ground. As the way the blue wind feels now, Metal may as well have been facing all of Team Guardian at once, because no matter how far apart, his brothers are always with him. True to this, at the same time, after working with Tails Doll to get his factory back into working order alongside his training, Tails launches a counter-assault against Metal Tails and his Badnik army, using what he scavenged, found in the factory, and reprogrammed or tinkered with. He certainly wasn't able to make anything as advanced as the sentient Tails Doll with only Badnik scraps and rust, but even so, forming his own army out of Sonic and Knuckles' toys was child's play, and Tails Doll can excel at commanding them, thanks to his peculiar mix of Tails' wit and Eggman's cunning. Thanks to this strategy, the way is clear for Tails, so he doesn't have to waste any time or energy just fighting his way to the main event, seeing so he can simply make his way back to the top of Stardust Speedway, while this time, he vows he's gonna take his copy down. Accepting the challenge, Metal Tails simply re-engages the fight where it was left off, clearly a ploy to analyze the Fox's new capabilities and tactics. Well, just like Sonic and Knuckles would, the Fox is ready to show it, admirably displaying that he is stronger and faster, but much more importantly, this Guardian Tails is far more gutsy and determined than last time, which makes far more of a difference than anything else. It's not that Tails isn't scared, he's terrified of this monster still, but he's more afraid of not getting back home to his big bros, as this inspires him to activate his Chaos Thunder, which causes a faint bubble of electricity to cover his body. Sadly, it isn't actually strong enough to directly short out Eggman's robots, or completely nullify the force of his attacks, but it does mess up Metal Tails' sensors and movement, as the magnetic force of this technique makes it difficult to pull its metallic frame away from Tails, unless it engages all his power into full-on retreating. And beyond that, this strategy is simply something the Tails metal is based off of would have never done. At the same time, smaller pieces of scrap and metallic debris that the two combatants both constantly have to worry about dodging, and even rings which help to suddenly sustain Tails, are also attracted to the Fox, allowing him to constantly formulate new plans of attack on the fly and dig his feet in for a long drawn-out brawl. But sadly, Metal Tails is still better built for this, and Chaos Energy is still new to him, so Tails and his Chaos ability once again falter, his faith in his own strength, intellect, and tinkering skills seemingly failing him, as he glares defiantly towards the robot stalking in for the kill. Metal Tails informs his organic counterpart that this is as far as an inferior form of life made of flesh and blood can go, assuring he should find peace, logic, and acceptance to becoming a part of the machine that is Dr. Robotnik's empire. However, to this claim, the voice of Tails Doll snarks that he seems to do just fine made out of soft cotton and a wonderful blend of polyester and acrylics. As out of nowhere, the plush suddenly leaps onto his metal successor's face, tying himself into a knot to obscure his optics, while the Metal Fox's sharp claws begin to make quick work of it, tearing apart and ripping out the plushy stuffing. In fear, Tails cries the doll needs to worry about itself, but the misfit toy replies he's afraid he can't do that, as Miles is after all the only person to not abandon or trash him despite him doing the same, and he's allowed him to play just as he was designed to, so this is the least he can do. However, with that declaration, Metal Tails rips the doll's face, smothering his own in half for a gruesome sight, one that makes Tails determined not to let this sacrifice be in vain. As on shaky legs, he stands and tries one more time, activating Chaos Thunder in a focused and specific manner at the ends of his tails in order to use them like massive electrical resonant transformer coils, which boost his speed immensely as he spins his tails to charge his doppelganger, who mirrors him, only to be surprised when Tails flips and steals the robot's tail vice technique. However, this is a literal yoink and twist, as with his spirit of innovation, the Fox Boy uses this hold with his coiled tails to suddenly turn Metal Tails into the end of an electrified sledgehammer, as it's flipped with tails and slams into the floor of Stardust Speedway hard enough that its head compacts into its body, while a strong thunderbolt of electricity runs through it and lights up the dark, smoky sky of the future. clearing away just a small blue hole in the pollution clouds that will shine down fresh, untainted light and air. This tiny, finite moment of beauty, freedom, and the comfort of being held is all Tails can offer the plush facsimile of himself, as the damage to its systems render its AI inoperable any further. With all three metal copies defeated, Amy and Knuckles soon arrive in the aftermath of these battles, with Knuckles reuniting with Tails and joining him in honoring Tails' doll, and Amy leaving Sonic rather surprised by how much he's changed in a year, signaling that it's time to go back, as they book it out of there, rendezvous in the present, and start tearing through the army of badniks Eggman had stationed on the chain of Little Planet, which they clear out and destroy, so the planetoid can go back on its way and thwart the Xers' plots for it. Then, the now team of four begin a campaign of fighting back against Eggman and setting right all the wrongs he'd have committed over the year, making better time and progress than they ever did in their prior adventures, which was already stunningly fast, so that as he watches his hard work and the strongholds of his empire he's built around the world all crumbling in front of him, far quicker and with less effort than it took him to establish them, the good Dr. Robotnik is the one who is suddenly put into a depressive spiral, as he laments that's simply not fair. At the same time, thanks to Sonic not destroying his counterpart nearly as much as his brothers did theirs, at least outside of a verbal sense, the remnants of Metal Sonic in the past suddenly reboots and runs diagnostics for all the good it will do in this helpless state trapped in the past. However, it's in this moment that the bot realizes it actually has a secondary directive implanted in it alongside Metal Knuckles, not by the Doctor, but by Metal Tails.
Dr. Robotnik's Little Planet operation, failure. SKT 2.0 protocol is now authorized for engagement.
And so, following orders and calculations that apparently operate millennia out of his view, the blue bot darkly collects his torn scraps and pieces into a neat pile to prevent as much loss or further damage as possible by the ravages of time, and then devotes all its auxiliary power into standby mode, seeking to wait out the necessary centuries, until before long, it is a seemingly unassuming nearby pile of scrap merely decorating the scenery of Stardust Speedway when Metal Knuckles falls in the present and Metal Tails in the future, all conveniently close to one another. And so, thanks to precise quantum calculations, mechanical willpower, the stolen biomatter and power of their organic counterparts, and what can only be described as the organic emotion hatred, the metal copy's final contingency is pulled off flawlessly, allowing their components to be pieced back together to something familiar, yet completely new and more powerful, a chimeric mechanical super being, capable of using the split second it has before Little Planet's complete departure to return to the present, and then begin crossing the void of space at shocking speeds, now likely Dr. Eggman's only hope.